Okay, this summer I'm thinking, first tip off was when I got a haircut. I noticed some gray hairs and thought, what the heck? I realized, okay, slim possibility that I might be getting older. But then I couldn't remember whether I was getting older. Okay, that's not a good sign. So then I thought, how can I be younger? And it came to me, get braces. That should knock off 40 years easy. Now, I mention this only because a couple of things. One, you thought it was unintelligible last year. It's gotten worse, folks, because there's certain letters that just don't work well with braces. The second thing is front rows. There tends to be a lot more spit flying out. Yeah, you might want to get a spit guard moved to the back. So don't give up on me yet. You've got to pace yourself. Braces, then maybe next year I'll get the motorcycle. FYI, Tuesday devotionals, which yes, I still think you should be going to, but I'm not going to tell you how to run your lives. If you want to go, we'll be leaving from my office about 20 to 11 each Tuesday morning, except for the next one. Next Tuesday we'll be leaving like at least 10:30 because it's the inauguration. If you don't show up, then we're not going together. If you want to meet us there, we usually sit in section E. Right as you walk in the door, we'll be either right there on the left or right, so as soon as the prayer said, we're out of there. Something to keep in mind that we'll kind of touch on throughout the rest of the semester and the rest of the year. We've touched on it before. Sort of remember, if this is BYU, there should be something different about your education at BYU. It will not be the content, because we use the same books they use all over the nation. Taking a moment to stop and realize that the more of a spiritual milieu environment you can create, the more the Spirit's going to be there, the more enhanced your learning is going to be. If you understand that concept of how the Spirit teaches you all things, brings all things to your remembrance, it's a different way of approaching the education. You should be able to learn in different ways than you would at any other university, but I can tell you now it will not happen if the Spirit's not there. So what I'm suggesting is you kind of keep that in mind, that you kind of prepare yourself before you come to class. And I'm not saying we can't have fun, we can't disagree, but you keep within the realms. The more the Spirit's here, the more we're going to learn what it comes down to, which is why we'll have prayer. If any of you four do not want to say the opening prayer for whatever reason, just email me or let me know. That's fine, it's not a big deal. Otherwise, I'll just randomly pick somebody. Some of you have sent me emails this summer saying, hey, let's do the Facebook thing, like me or whatever it is. Not surprising, I don't have a Facebook account. I don't plan on getting a Facebook account before I die. I may, but I don't plan on it. So don't take it personal if I don't like you or whatever it is. Same thing on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the professional Facebook. I don't have one of those either. So if I don't like you or whatever profession that they do, don't take it too personal. I may get to LinkedIn someday, but only if I lose my job. There's a place for computers. So far, the best use I've found for computers is this front row. They act as pretty good spit guards if you got a laptop.
That's what I got.
Yeah, Casey's on this one. Okay, last year I had this really liberal policy when it came to eating in class. I've come to regret that. Thought it got a little out of hand. You may not have. So this year we're going to try something new. No eating in class. It's pretty simple. We'll take a break about halfway through so that you can, I don't think you're going to die with no sustenance for 2.5 hours. I may be wrong. If you're hypoglycemic or pregnant or something like that and you feel you just got to have it, then take care of it quietly, unobtrusively. Otherwise, don't do it. It was getting crazy, I thought, last year. I mean, we were getting 7-course spreads, and some of which smelled really good, some of which didn't. Both were distracting, by the way. So I think you should be able to make it to an hour, hour and a half-ish without dying. Okay, if a phone goes off or your computer plays some cute little song, you just lost half a grade. So the law says, that's really unprofessional, my law says that. So you lose half a grade. But Mercy says, if you want to bring brownies for the rest of the class and make sure I get some, because if I don't get the brownies, it didn't happen. And not just brownies, but good brownies. Well, I'll do brownies, but I'll put salt in them. I'll show him. You'll show me that somebody's got to be the bottom half of the grade. So something happens like that. I make a little notation by your picture. That will be the half at the end of the semester. I don't worry about it. I just go back and look at all the little notations. Those notations lose a half a grade off the final grade. If you bring brownies, and I actually get one, and they're good, then I erase the notation. And that puts it on you to decide whether or not, because you don't have to bring the brownies. That's not a requirement of the class. The requirement of the class is to teach you professionalism by docking you every time your phone goes off. Okay, we also had an interesting discussion in one of our faculty meetings about the use of computers in the room. It was an interesting discussion, as in, why would you not want computers in the room? Well, because people are over there playing Candy Crush with the hammer and the candy. That's a great one, isn't it? They're doing Facebook, they're doing emails. They're not doing anything related to class. It's like, yes, so I'm okay with that, because on the assumption that you want to spend $3,000 a semester to sleep. Spend $3,000 a semester to sleep. We've kind of reached the point where you're responsible. My job is to provide a teaching environment where you can learn. Your job is to learn. I can't make you learn. You can't make me teach. If I do my job, you do your job, the magic happens. So that's what we're shooting for. What else? Are we getting strict enough here? Are you feeling it? Constricted? Or are you feeling it open up? Like your mind is expanding, it's like suddenly the ideas are flowing, they're sticking for once. Computers, use them, do what you got to do. One of the faculty mentioned that one of the students had complained because the person in front of them had been viewing some inappropriate websites, and they were having a hard time concentrating because it's an inappropriate website. But just know that I have no qualms. I will crucify you should that happen in this class, as in you're out of the program. Now you can appeal, of course, and you may not get thrown out of the program, but just know I don't have any problems about helping you with your professionalism. I really couldn't get my head around somebody in the program would do that, but if you're doing something that is distracting, like playing World of Warcraft and is bugging everybody behind you, then don't. Wait till another class to play that. Now, there will be some times where I'm trying to get from point A to point B, but it's the process I'm after, not point B. Other times, want the point B, because I found it's kind of nice to say, Aaron, look up, and whatever it is we're talking about, see what Dr. Google's got to say. That has worked well. There are other times I don't want to know what Dr. Google's got to say until you figure it out along the way. So I'll tell you to shut down your computers, as in close them, for a few minutes, because I want you engaged is what I want. For this class, midterms, the questions on my midterms and finals you should find very similar to the questions you'll run across when you take the state exam, the licensing exam. Okay, so, test is 25%, it's 50 questions. If the final exam is the same as the midterm exam, then it's probably not comprehensive. Self-directed readings, a little bit different. Instead of all or none, broken it down so that you can read two of the books, but if you don't get the third one read, you don't lose all the points. And these books are a lot easier to read. These are, the Kilpatrick text is the main one. It's not great, it's not bad. It's the organization that does this levels of need, which I really like. Rather than assuming all the problems you're going to run into as a social worker are the same, it says, well, they're not all the same. And so it breaks it down into levels of need, which fits very well with different theories, by the way. The theories, you can transcend the levels, but they break down into different theories that just makes this nice, orderly, into an analytical, what's better than order and being right. The Mnuchin text, probably 75% of it is case study. It's not that thick in the first place. That should take you about 15, 20 minutes to read. The O'Hanlon text it's the solution focus. There's a lot of other books out there on solution focus. I don't think solution focus is all that complicated. So rather than taking 300 pages, O'Hanlon does it in 100 and something. And it's got a fair number of case studies, so you get that dialogue thing going, it just eats up the pages. That's a very easy read too. It's actually kind of interesting. You have assigned readings before class each time, but by the end of the semester, at the end of the semester on the final, I'll say, tell me what you read. You've either read all the book and you get the points, or you haven't read all the book and you don't get any points. So you got the whole semester to do the readings, but yeah, the readings are divided up by weeks, so that we'll go over the readings. 5% of your total grade is the Mnuchin text. If you do not read the whole thing, you don't get that 5%. Same teacher does it. Gottman's book, some of you are familiar with it. He's got several books he's written as a result of that research. The academic one called The Marriage Clinic is about 700 pages long. It's really good. Boy, just a little more than I think you need. It gets into the whole research methodology and all that kind of, and just really gets into the whole process. He wrote a book for the layperson, so took all that, what he learned from that research, and wrote a book for the layperson, which is very easy to read. It gives you the ideas, it gives you suggestions for how to treat the ideas. Also, very, very helpful. It's going to happen. Your bishop's going to come to you and say, hey, can you do a fifth Sunday? Hey, can you do a Relief Society lesson on what? Something to do with marriages. We're having a lot of marital problems. And you'll say, no problemo. And you'll go to your Gottman book. There's about 800 firesides in that book. So I mean, and you can combine them. There's 7 principles. They're not in order. You can mix and match any way you want. So you kind of fine tune it to whatever it is the bishop wants. So you'll like the Gottman book. And your own marriage. If you want a good marriage, do those things. That's the whole basic premise of his research. Follows these couples year after year after year. And it gets the question, these are divorcing, these aren't, what's the differences? It's pretty simple, straightforward. And if you really have contempt for your spouse, he'll divorce 95% of the time. Just the worst horseman. Okay, collaborative learning paper. You'll get together in groups, which we'll assign momentarily, and basically answer the question, apply a theory that you learn in this class to a problem that you'd run into in a couple or family, and show me that you understand how to apply the theory to the problem in 8 to 10 pages. The whole idea of this collaborative learning is in the process of working with groups, which I know is a pain, but in the process of working with groups, there should be some cross-pollination of ideas, styles. I know one person, type A, the one that's wound too tight, is the one that does it all. But in the graduate program, there's a lot of folks wound pretty tight, so, so we should get some cross-sharing. So, you might want to read this because it pretty much spells it out. This is the grading rubric that I'll use. It amazes me when I tell the class, this is the grading rubric that I'll use. And you'll hand in the papers and you haven't followed the grading rubric that I use. So you lose points. Which can be good and bad. It could be resentful, except by then you should have all the skills necessary to realize, oh, the one person that screwed up their whole section that causes all to get a C in the class, that you'll deal with those feelings and become one with the universe again and not become hateful or resentful towards that person. So it's all good.
Yeah.
Now, interesting thing about the paper, you're going to have it all written by week 12. Because at week 12, you're going to bring in about 4 copies of that paper per group, and you're going to distribute them to people in the class so that everybody in the class will have a paper to read that week. And you'll go home and you'll critique the paper, not grade it, critique it. You'll say, I like this, or I don't understand this, or what are you talking about, or good organization, or whatever, just feedback. You'll bring that paper back the next week, and we'll give them back to the original groups. So the original group will now have 4 papers, 4 copies of that paper with feedback on it. So you can then get together and decide, do we want to make these changes, or are these good ideas, or nah, I don't know what they're talking about. But it'll give you something to talk about. Also, in the process of reading the paper, critiquing the paper, you should realize that A, maybe your paper needs some work. So when you get back to your group, you can say, I read a paper, boy, they did this and this, so maybe we need to take a look at that. Or you'll realize, wow, I'm glad I'm not in that group, because our paper's really good compared to that one. But it gives you some comparison, so you got some idea of where you're at. It's part of the learning process. Then you'll go back and rewrite the paper, if you need to, and hand it in 2 weeks later to last week's class. And that should be a pretty polished paper. Okay, this paper, you should be able to get an A on this paper. But I'm telling you, what I've seen is nobody wants to do any. You'll take the paper and you'll divide it into 4 sections right off the bat. Then you'll each do your section, and then nobody will pull it together because it's not my job. I'm busy, I don't have time. And so it'll come across very disjointed. And one of those 4 sections will be a little bit messed up. And no one will correct it. And so you all go down in flames, because I'm not going to, oh, this particular section done by whomever, so that person gets the low grade. No, you go down in flames together. But there's no need to go down in flames on this. This could be a very good learning experience, I hope. Okay, any questions on the assignments, what we're going to do in here? Oh, by the way, it just dawned on me, it's a little late. This is like starting the videotape and then asking the client if it's okay to videotape. We're being audio recorded. This is being audio recorded, so if we wanted to turn it off for whatever reason, if you've got something, you know, we can shut this one off for a minute, then we shut it off. Hopefully, ideally, this is for Dr. Lim. He's going to go back and become clinical and get licensed in the whole shooting match, and so he wants to sit on the classes, but he can't, so he's going to audio record the classes and then listen to them, and assures us that he will then, that the only purpose of this is for his edification, that there is no big brother aspect to it, and that he will erase them as soon as he gets through listening to them. We'll see. Preguntas. I'm learning Spanish, by the way, in case you haven't noticed. Text is the Kilpatrick. When we get to structural, Then we bring in assessing families and couples, which is the structural text. When we get to solution focus and search of solutions is the solution focus. This is the text. The way it's set up, that book it lends itself to opening up and being able to go in different directions. That's kind of what we'll do, is that'll give us a format or framework, and then we'll branch into these other structural, solution focus, and Gottman's. Okay, anything else? Okay, all these in the content. These things will not show up on mine, but they will show up on yours. I mean, it says they're there, but they won't actually come up on mine. I have to go to student view to get them to read them. Go figure. Okay, where were we? First lecture is okay. Once we get into this, we're going to get way into the philosophies of men, some of which are pretty good, by the way. But in the meantime, maybe we need to back up and remember the foundation. I would suggest, if there's a discrepancy between what we learned in this, that you go with this. But part of what you need to figure out is how much you want to buy into this. So we're going to go over it. Well, not everybody that is LDS is LDS, is what it comes down to. And that's fine. I'm not here to indoctrinate you. This is an LDS sponsored institution, so I have no problem going over the LDS perspective. But you may or may not buy into it. And if you don't, that's fine. You just need to be aware that, okay, wait, I'm not really buying into this. Be aware of your biases. But this is a good place, I think, to start the class. This is a class about marriage and families. This is what we call our prophets say. This is the foundation for marriage and family. There's some good ideas in here. Hopefully over the course of the semester you'll learn to translate. There's a lot of the concepts and the theories that we'll learn that are gospel concepts, but they call them different things. Okay, it doesn't matter what you call them. If the concept is divine, if it's eternal, if it's true, it's true. And so learning to pull from here and pull it in your practice is good stuff. Some of these theories are really slick. The whole Gottman, all his principles readily translate into gospel terms. Gottman's a devout Jew, by the way, so it's not too tough to. And I'm just suggesting, keep this in the back of your head. You've been over it a million times. One more is not going to hurt. See how I made that bigger?
Yeah.
Good point. Because alcohol's legal, do you have to use it? But society says it's okay. Okay. So what do the prophets say? Yeah. Well, the marijuana is going to be an interesting one, because I don't think it's going away. It's just a matter of time for medicinal purposes. Any others? There's like 7 principles in social work. That's one of them. Social justice. Yeah, let's get the society, the community. And social work is actually, no bias here, social work's principles line up very well with the gospel, most of them. They call them different things. But when you start helping disadvantaged populations, which disadvantaged populations do we help? I mean, like the hungry, the naked, those that are in prison, things outlined in Matthew. It's different words, but it's the same idea. That does bring up the point. At some point, you're going to have to figure out what your policy is towards family. Because family will come to you, you have answers. And so do you see it for free, or is it reduced rate, or no discount for family? Or I'm just saying, keep that in the back of your head, because the dentist is a nice one to have. Any other thoughts? Well, ultimately, that's an awful lot of therapy, is to help families be what they can be. Because when they come into therapy, they're not there. So how do you get them there? And that's the trick. Well, and that's one of the things that makes social work, it's the big thing that makes social work different from psychology is that social aspect, the person in the environment, something in the environment of society, that you got to do more than just the individual, and that's a starting place, but it's got to be bigger. All this is telling you, this is from somebody that knows this. They're saying, here's how to be happy. So when somebody comes in for therapy and says, I want to be happy, what do they don't know, but you do. Now how do you get them there? And some will go there and some won't, but at least you know where you're headed. But you can't call it religion. You can, just not as a therapist. Because as a therapist, you're not here to promote the religion. It's not your job to preach the gospel. Once you get licensed by the state, you agree to follow the dictates of the state, to follow their rules. But that should not be a big problem. Truth is truth, regardless of what you call it. Well, that's one thing I like about social work is it gives you you can find a place to help the family, whether it's on an international level or an individual level, but because there's plenty of work to be done. And yet getting outside your own little box in Utah, that can be kind of tricky, because when you think family, you think white, middle class, 4.5 children, because that's Utah. But there's other families that don't have that luxury. But that's what's kind of fun being as old as I am. In the 30 years I've been doing this, I have seen some incredible changes in my lifetime, and I'm not dead yet. And so I project 30 years down the road, you will see some incredible changes, good and bad, in your lifetime. So the question becomes, what do you do to become part of that? What do you do to affect change? And there's a ton of possibilities. Okay, lest anybody have any biological malfunctions, let's take a break. 5 minutes. Okay, what's the difference between a disagreement and contention? So you can't disagree over time, or it becomes contentious. So anytime you disagree with the person is contention, as opposed to the issue when it's disagreement. So when does the disagreement become belligerent? So an unhealthy relationship, it's always contention. They never just disagree. Okay, so no matter what, once you disagree, once the attack starts, it just became contention. Can you have contention without the personal attack? Is it the compromise that makes the difference between disagreeing and contention? What do we know about contention? It's of the devil. So what does that tell us? How does the devil work? Okay, I'll go with the pride component. That's just the direction I'm not headed. So I'm not disagreeing, it's just that's not where I'm headed. Okay, war in heaven, pre-existence. What was the hallmark of Satan? I would suggest did Satan have a plan? Oddly enough, he didn't. He had a proposal. He didn't have a plan. If he had a plan, 1/3 the host of heaven would now be perfect and would be giving all glory to Satan. Because that was his plan, that was his proposal. He had no plan. There was no reality to that. He couldn't make that happen. He just threw this proposal out there. It's not like we had two plans to choose from. We had a plan and some harebrained idea. Well, but it wasn't a plan. I mean, otherwise there would be another world somewhere with Satan as the God and people living on it and being perfect because he made them perfect, and they would be worshiping Satan. Okay, that's not true. He had a proposal. I would suggest there's at least the two big hallmarks of Satan are his use of coercion and his use of deception. It's how he operates. So the difference between a disagreement and contention is their coercion. Some of you alluded to this. When you start making it personal, why do you make it personal? Because you want to force the other person to come to your way of thinking, to come to your side. And so you belittle them, you humiliate them, you make fun of them, you call them names, you do whatever you have to force them to come to your way of thinking. That's the coercion piece. I would suggest that's why it's of the devil. Because disagreements are a part of life. I mean, you can't not have disagreements, but they don't have to be coercive. They don't have to be contentious, but they can be. So that concept is going to become very important when you start working with couples. Because at some point somebody will say, we disagree, he's of the devil. Well, why do you say that? Because he's contentious. And you'll need to have a definition of what contention is versus disagreement. You can't get away from disagreements. I mean, they're part of life. But you can't get away from the coercion piece. The making fun of, the ridiculing, which ties in with Gottman stuff, the whole contempt and criticism and stuff. In this class, I would expect to have disagreements, but not contention. It's almost inconceivable that I'm going to be wrong, but allowing that it could happen, we may disagree on some things, and that's okay. Because in a marriage, it's okay. With a lot of marriages, you'll learn to agree to disagree. That you're not going to come to terms, you're not going to compromise. You're going to be Republican and Democrat, and that's not going to change. And that's okay. That the marriages, you can have an incredible difference of opinion, but as long as they're both respectful and not doing that coercion piece, not attacking the other person, it's not a big deal. The marriage will be fine. But enter that attack, that coercion, and it starts to become not fun. Questions? Comments? Okay. Some of you say, hey, why don't we ever get to learn about theory in here? I'm glad you asked. I think we've had this discussion before with the last section. So, theory is a tool. It's one of the tools in our tool bag. We like theory. What is theory? And your response is, oh, wait a minute, we talked about this last semester, 666. The class I loved, the class I thought I would hate, but I learned to love. Did we have this? Maybe we didn't have this discussion. I think we did. Well, it surprised me because out of a group of 40 students, okay, yeah, some are going to forget or not get it. But boy, we can get all 40 of them this time. It's like, huh, maybe I didn't teach that one so well. Okay, so there's got to be something observed that would produce patterns that what? You're right. You're drawing a line that I don't think is there, because everybody has. You're talking about kind of an informal theory, but when I get through defining this, I think you're going to find it fits the informal or the formal. That it's ideas, but what the ideas are what? They're based on something observed, and then based on those observations, you put them into some kind of pattern, some kind of organization, some kind of structure. Now, the theories we're talking about are going to be formalized, written down, all that, but the theories in your head, I think are going to follow the same idea. Can you prove or disprove a theory? You can support it or unsupported. Theories, because they're ideas, they can never be proven or disproven. See, psychoanalysis come along, it dominated. And then learning theory come along 1910, 11, 15, somewhere in there, in opposition to psychoanalytic. And it put forth this theory. And it was a good theory, still is. Over time, somebody said, you know, this explains an awful lot, but there's parts it doesn't explain. What if we added a piece to it? And so learning theory, you have two branches of learning theory. The operative and the conditional, the classical. Yeah, get these right. Okay. Then someone comes along in the 40s, 50s and says, yeah, that behavioral kind of does it, but you know what does a better job, I think? Cognitive, the way we think. that better explains it. And that stuck around for about 20, 30 years until somebody come along. You know what best explains it? It's the chocolate and the peanut butter. If we take the cognitive and the behavioral, put them together, then it explains so much more. And that's where we're at today. In fact, there's some suggesting that this whole idea of mindfulness and acceptance concept, when added to the CBT, will become the third way, whatever that means. I don't know, I'm not sure. But it's one of the reasons you're seeing mindfulness crop up everywhere. Because mindfulness explains some things that can't be dismissed. So what do we do with it? Well, throw it on to some other theory that also explains a lot, and combine the two. And now I would suggest that's what you'll do in your own head. Every one of you have theories on all kinds of things. You have theories on relationships, you have theories on teaching, theories on fun, theories on manners, theories on morals. You've got theories of all kinds of stuff that you're constantly revising based on new information. But you use the theories to help you explain something that you've observed, and then you put them in some kind of patterns, you organize them somehow, and that becomes your theory. And it will stay your theory until something comes along, some other observation that doesn't quite fit, and so you modify the theory. You come up with another pattern. Speech?
Sure.
Predict, explain, describe. That's what theories do. Based on some observed phenomena, something that you've seen, you've watched, you've heard, which are then organized into some kind of propositions, principles, call them whatever you will. So the theory allows you to do the same thing to address the same situation over and over and over again in a systematic way. That's part of this pattern, it's systematic. The theories that we're going to go over in this class are theories that have been around for quite a while, that have been proven through research to work on a pretty consistent, regular basis. If a theory becomes to where it describes, explains, and predicts every single time, what do we call it? We don't have a theory of gravity, we have a law of gravity, because every single time gravity works. So it's a law. Theory, that's why theories can either be proven or disproven. If they become so habitual they work every time, we make them a law. That tends not to happen. The theories, what happens is we get better and better at observing and try to explain more and more. At some point the theory breaks down. The theories we'll go over are pretty good theories, but at some point the theory breaks down. And you'll hear the metaphor, the map is not the terrain. It doesn't matter how good the map, it's not the same as the real terrain. And so the theories are tools. They allow you to talk to each other about similar things. They allow you to address the same problems in similar ways. A good theory will allow you to address a wide range of problems in a similar way. And so it's a pretty good tool to have. Because what I'm suggesting, this whole idea of eclectic, is that you don't have patterns. And so you address things in a pretty random, willy-nilly fashion. Now, can you do that twice in a row? Maybe, maybe not. The idea of being able to pull and pick and choose in a randomness, and that's eclectic, I'm calling BS on that. I'm saying you want to have some good theories that will cover a wide variety of problems. You will learn to frame the problem to fit the theory, not learn a different theory for every problem. Now, some problems lend themselves better to some theories. Motivational interviewing was developed for what? Substance abuse. It works very well for substance abuse. Is it the only one? No. Does motivational interviewing work very well for sexual disorders? Not so much. So it's good in one area, but not so good in all areas. And so it has limited usefulness. Very useful in some, but not so useful in others. And so you look for theories. Is there a theory out there that will do very good here, and here, and here, and here? And there are. But all theories break down at some point. And hopefully you'll be involved in the process of every theory we have was made up by somebody. These don't come from Sinai. Somebody observed some stuff and said, you know, based on what I've observed, here's what I think's going on. And they wrote it down. We called it theory. Structural. Mnuchin said, you know, I've been watching these little ghetto kids, and I'm thinking, here's what's going on. So now we have structural theory. You can make up your own theories. You can modify it. All I'm suggesting is once you understand what a theory is and how it works, that gives you a pretty versatile tool. That's what I'm suggesting. Any questions on what a theory is? There are grand theories that tend to explain in pretty broad strokes. This basic idea of theory is going to apply across all situations, all disciplines. That this theory of relativity, he has a theory that says, here's, based on what I've seen molecules and atoms and all that stuff do, I've watched them, and based on that, here's what I think is happening. We've got to be able to observe it. Otherwise, we start talking about philosophies, ideas that are not, a theory is based on some kind of observation. They're based on some observations of whatever. Electrons, people, the moon. You develop a way of organizing those observations into patterns, some kind of systematic organization, which then allows you to predict, explain, and describe. Without the observations, it's not a theory, it would be a philosophy, it would be an approach, it would be an idea, an opinion, I don't know what. But a theory is based on some kind of observation of something. Go back to Jung or Freud. What is the observed phenomenon they're trying to explain? What is it he observed? What is it he's trying to explain? What is it Jung tried to explain? That Freud tried to explain? That Beck tried to explain? That Skinner tried to explain? That Pearls tried to explain? Human behavior. They're watching human behavior and are trying to explain how people, why people do what they do. Now, given that, then you get into all this, and then there's a fair amount of disagreement as to whether or not this can be measured and observed. Because how do you measure an ego? How do you measure a shadow? I don't know, because that's the outcome. Somebody's organizing those observations so that they can then describe, explain, or predict what's going on. Well, no, it's because this part can get pretty messy. And this, when you get into the research, this is the part that does people. It's what's done psychoanalysis. It's what all the existential philosophy. They try to come up with a pattern that explains what they're seeing, but their pattern may or may not be measurable. And so then the question, wait, if it's not measurable, then how real is it? How important is it? And then you get into this whole debate of what's going on. Okay, it's all valid, but it doesn't change what a theory is. They saw something going on and they tried to explain it by putting down their patterns. And that's where, on paper, Freudian stuff, Freud can explain that his whole method, his whole systematic organization of ego and superego, can explain just about anything in terms of human behavior. But they couldn't get it off the paper. In terms of, okay, now, on paper, you can explain everything. Okay, we got somebody sitting in front of us that is depressed. Now what? Well, it's because, okay, I'm having a hard time. I can't engage their ego. Well, it's because the id's in the way. Okay, so how do I get the id out of the way? Well, you gotta let them do a neurosis, find a neurosis, get that transfer thing going. Okay, this is getting pretty abstract here, and they're still depressed. Well, and so you run into some problems there. And there is that whole argument of it doesn't need to be measurable to be valid. And there's one argument, well, of course, and another argument, well, no. Just because we can't measure doesn't mean it's valid. Not that it's invalid. Can you measure the spirit? No. Spirit's invalid? Well, to someone who believes you have to be able to measure it, yes it is. But to someone who doesn't buy that it has to be measured, it has felt the spirit, no it doesn't. Okay, Okay, so based on your experience, let's hear your theories of good teaching. I can take it. Bring it on. You've been through numerous teachers. You're probably into the hundreds by now. What is good teaching? You've observed class after class after class from kindergarten on up. Okay, what patterns have you noticed? What's the organization? What are the principles? Okay. And somewhere along the way you figured out that somebody that's prepared is a better teacher than someone that's not. Okay, student focused. Okay, that's enough. We could go on and on. Your observation, how do you explain good teaching? So, if you want to tell your friend or your children or your spouse or whomever how to get a good teacher, what would you tell them? Well, I don't know. This is good stuff. What's your experience with Rate My Professor? So does it fit your observation? Does it help you explain good teaching? But see, why was Rate My Professor started? Yeah. So they could explain what good teaching is. Okay, so now let's do a website. Let's let everybody come on. That's the pattern. Let's let them express their opinions and tell what they think about that particular professor. Did this work? Is Rate My Professor, what's the validity of Rate My Professor? You're using this as part of you're using somebody else's observations as part of your observations to help you explain good teaching. So how do you do that? If you're getting bipolar answers, so then for Rate My Professor to have validity, there's got to be a time factor in there. Okay, so what I would suggest is this whole Rate My Professor concept is not really part of your observations, but is rather used to either supports your observation or it doesn't. But it's not a big enough factor, it's not a valid enough factor for it to adapt or adjust your observations. If you think a professor's good and Rate My Professor says the person's bad, you'll ignore Rate My Professor. If you think they're good and Rate My Professor says they're good, then yeah, this is good. And so it's not a game changer, but it can be added support. Okay, that comes into play when you start doing therapy. You're going to have theories. The theories are going to guide you. Are they going to work all the time? No. So then the question comes, why are they not working? Is it because you've just got a skewed sample? You got a client that is just outside the norm for clients, or something else? I don't know. But you'll learn to fit it into your theory. If Rate My Professor, if they did something that would, I don't know what, offhand, improve their sampling, and they did random sampling of colleges across the universe or across the nation, it was purely random, and then come up with results, then it would be more believable, more valid, because you wouldn't have these extremes. But until then, it's a measure. And maybe it's a good measure, maybe it's not. And some of you may have found that you have figured out how to Rate My Professor. I find the same thing when I do look up a review on something. I'm going to buy a lawnmower, okay, that particular lawnmower, read the reviews. Because what do the reviews do? They tend to polarize. I hated this thing. I had to put it together all by myself. No one told me I had to put it together all by myself. This is the best motor ever. First time I pulled it, started. So what am I looking for? What are they saying? Because if I get several of them saying this thing's a piece of crap, and several of them saying this is really good, okay, it may be really good and has the potential to be a piece of crap. And so it's a measure. In therapy, you're going to find the same situation. So, theory is our friend. We like theory. It helps us to explain, describe, and predict what's the human behavior, what's going on in therapy. Okay, so what do we know about systems theory? And it explains many things and describes many things because it's a good theory. Let's go over systems theory. Let's review that. The family therapies, just about all of them are based on systems theory. The assumption is you understand systems theory and how systems work, and then based on that now, let's learn structural, solution focus, whatever. The idea behind systems theory is you look at the system as an entity. The system is made up of several components, which you do not worry about because those components form a system. Not all of you will be able to think systems. You'll keep breaking it down into the individuals. The system will hold true of any system. We're going to take that and apply the system to family. You'll have a tendency to see individuals. That's mom, that's dad. The system functions as a system. Now, another way of explaining that same behavior is individual. I'm not saying this takes the place of individual theories. It's different. It's another way of looking. Both work. Knowing both gives you more options. But you do not look at the mom and say, oh, she's depressed. You look at the system and say, what's going on that allows mom to be depressed? That mom is part of that system. And if you don't look at the whole system, you're going to be losing some really good information. And so it's a different way of thinking. The system is your unit, not the individuals. You don't look at the individual, you look at how that individual is tied to their system. Systems theory, as a theory, is going to give you some ideas of, based on a family system, here's what I think is going on. Von Berglampius once said, here's how I organize it, here's my patterns that I saw. And so we're going to use those patterns to describe how a family operates. It's a theory of how we think families operate. Well, systems theory is, well, if you can get your head around it, it just opens up a whole nother way of thinking. And if you don't, that's fine, because the individual explains it all too. The individual theories, cognitive, behavioral, all that, suppose that it's within the individual within their head the way they think. It's within their head what they consider reinforcement or punishment. It's within the person. That's what you look at, what's going on inside the person. Okay, those theories work well. Or you can put that person, whatever's going on inside his or her head, put them in the context of their family. Now let's look at the family. Let's look at the theories that describe the family and how the family operates. This is a different way of thinking. Last winter, get all that stuff. This semester, we think systems. Okay? That's if you understand systems. If you don't understand systems, you say, yeah, we got the kid all fixed up and turned him back, and the kid screwed up again. The kid couldn't put up with peer pressure. The kid forgot what he learned, and to blame it all on the kid. If you understand systems, you'll go, okay, wait a minute. We had the kid pretty sharp. Why would that kid fall apart? What's going on with the system, with the family? Because this is actually what got me into, what made me a believer in marriage and family therapy. I was working at the state hospital, adolescent boys unit. I'm telling you, we had kids that were snots, world-class snots. 6, 9 months later, they'd be fine upstanding young men. I mean, it's a good program, pure behavioral, but it was a good program. And that used to amaze me that these kids would make so much progress, and they would go home, and 6 months later, they'd be back. And I mean, I'm serious. It took me a while to process it, to figure out what was going on, because I know the work that had been done there. They had done some really good work. They had made changes in their lives, some serious changes. But they'd go back home, and it's like it never happened. So I started talking to these young men, saying, hey, what happened? Okay, we would teach them to do things like, please pass the salt. Thank you. Nothing radical, but for no radical. I mean, it was getting them to think outside their own selfishness, manners. They would go back home and say, please pass the salt. Oh, please pass the salt. Is that what they taught you? Are you too good for us now? We all have to say please? And they would just get hammered for doing the things that they had learned. They would come home from school and read a book, study, do their homework. Oh, you think you're so smart now you can read the book, you're going to be a doctor or something? and would just get hammered. Well, guess what? They quit saying please, they quit doing their homework, and they started doing the same thing the family did. That's the way the family operated. They fit in with the family, which just happened to go against everything we've taught them. And part of the family says, stick it to the man. Yeah. Go out and steal, do drugs, do whatever you want, because in that culture that's okay. Stick it to the man. And then they'd get sent into the state hospital, which was the man, and the man would say, clean up your act. And they'd clean up their act. And then go back to the family that said, stick it to the man. And they just looped. Oddly enough, now, they do family therapy at the state hospital. Because someone figured it out. But yeah, we got to get the family involved in here somehow. Because we're putting a lot of time and effort, and it's going nowhere. Can you do family therapy with an individual? If you only have one person in the room, can you do family therapy? Au contraire, yes you can. Because you're thinking that person's part of a system. I can tell a fair amount about any one of you in here by asking a couple of questions. One would be your birth order. What's birth order going to tell me about your family? Knowing you like I know you, some of you are more assertive, more responsible, more initiative, older children. Every time? No, but a fair amount of the time. The fact you're here and you're not at the point of the mountain, that tells me a fair amount about your parents, about the way you were raised. The fact that you're here getting a master's degree, not a bachelor's, that says more. All that has to go in with the way you were raised. You were raised with values, with morals that are different than somebody at the point of the mountain. Every time across the board, no. There's some people at the point of the mountain that were raised the same way you were, that missed something. And some of you did not come from a perfect background. But generally speaking, I know the way systems work. And so seeing the individual, when I have a 22-year-old come in and right off the bat say, I hear you're a therapist, yes, okay, and just warms up to me, just really cottons to me, just is very pleasing to me. What does that tell me? It tells me she's got a screwed up relationship with her father, and most likely was molested somewhere. If she can form that close of an attachment that quick with a stranger, that's not normal. And so I can tell you a fair amount about her parents, never having met them. Her father is dominant and controlling, and her mother submissive and goes along with it. The dad will be abusive because she has learned to be a pleaser. Not just to be a pleaser, but to be a pleaser quick. Okay, it's that kind of thing. One individual, I know how the system works. And so it's just another tool. Okay, one of the things we'll learn, not this week because we're almost out of time, but next week is this word called equilibrium or homeostasis. Same idea. But yeah. What's the most powerful force in the world, in the universe? Right, the force. The force. What's right below that? Homeostasis. That system will set up a way of doing things, and it does not like to change. Now, if you know that about a system, you can plan on it. If you don't know about a system, you'll try and change, and it won't change, and you will blame the individual. Kid's stupid, he wouldn't listen to me, was unmotivated. I won't buy that. If somebody doesn't change in therapy, by the way, whose fault do I think it is? The therapists. They're coming to you for a reason. You've got the knowledge, you've got the expertise. You should be making something happen here. Unless they're in shackles, then arguably they're not the most motivated client. But you should be able to help them see the value of wanting to choose to do the work. Now let me tell you how to justify so you sleep at night. You planted some seeds. They may not have grown right up, but the seeds are in there. They'll grow up next week, next month, next year. We call that success. We win, we never lose. What I'm suggesting is, yes, the research says about 2/3 of the cases will improve. either some or a lot. About a third of them will either get worse or nothing. That's cognitive behavioral is a little better. It hits instead of 6, and the statistics, the research is pretty consistent between about 65 and 70%. Cognitive will come in around 85, 75, 80%. Okay, so it's a little better. And I would suggest, if you know what you're doing as a therapist, you should be hitting around 90, 95 on a regular basis. That 66% is an average, meaning some are doing a lot better, and there's some crappy therapists out there. My experience, there's a fair number of crappy therapists. We ain't going to be the crappy therapists. Up the road, they be the crappy therapists. But seriously, knowing the theory, having theories to help you, the tools, it should be pretty unusual that you don't do good. And maybe they don't make instant progress, but you know that something's sunk in, you know that there's been some seeds planted that will sprout later on. And with time and experience, you'll know that. You'll do techniques, the way you approach things, you'll know, okay, this is going to work because it has worked so many times in the past. So you're patient with that. Somebody that was, women who were abused, it takes between 6 and 7 times of entering therapy before they finally stay. But for that 7th one that stick, that first one's got to plant some seeds. The second one waters it and nourishes it. So by the 6th or 7th time, then they're ready to hear. That first one doesn't get the seed planted, then it's not 6 or 7 times, it's 8 or 9 or 10 or 11. So we're going to be the good ones. For next week, talk to Mr. Google, see what he has to say about what a system is and systems theory, the different principles of systems theory. Because it's good stuff. Last one home's rotten egg.